welcome to another episode of Spiritual Grit. Today I have joining me a very special guest, Dr. Beverly Mitchell. She is a professor of historical theology at Wesley Theological Seminary. Her teaching and research interests include systematic theology, church history, human dignity, genocide, global poverty, the African American struggle for justice, Holocaust studies, and the challenge of white supremacy in church and society. She serves as a consultant for churches that wish to commit to being anti-racist. She is a board member of Bread for the World and Bread for the World Institute. And for many of us, she is an affectionately known as a community griot and a wise counselor. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Mitchell.
Well, it really is my privilege, Nila. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy you're here as well. Without further ado, let's get a little gritty. Is that all right? Let's get into things.
Okay.
All right. So my first question for you is, in Black abolitionism, a quest for human dignity, you said struggle against oppression, racism, and other societal enslavement is a righteous fight. That the liberation is the manifestation of God's activity. Why is it important for people to see social activism and struggles against oppressive forces as a righteous fight, even in interreligious and diverse movements such as Black Lives Matter?
Actually, that quotation, which is in the book, is actually something that the late James Cone said about the struggle, in particular for Black justice. And I think it's important to recognize that, particularly from those who are part of the Christian church, because we sometimes divide social justice from evangelism, church activities, etc., and bifurcate what is really the challenge of social justice is seeking the justice of God. And so to understand that this work for justice, this fight against oppression, is not simply something you do on the side, but is part and parcel of one's vocation as a disciple. And certainly the abolitionists that I highlighted and those that I did not certainly understood that their ministry, 3 of them were ordained ministers, that their ministry involved the struggle against slavery and white supremacy. So it is, in fact, righteous to treat others as you would want to be treated. And it's worth fighting for. And I think that we can do this certainly on an interfaith basis. There are many of the traditions, other religious traditions, recognize the value of human beings, and we can all, I think, collaborate as allies together in this fight. And those who have no religious affiliation, certainly, they may have a moral code which leads them to fight for justice. And in this fight, as we can see as how difficult it is, we need all the allies that we can get.
Yes. This fight is certainly vocational based and it must be collaborative. Absolutely. Yes. I like that, the notion of vocation, justice and activism as vocation. And speaking of that, anyone who has taken a course on Black religious history or even stopped by your office knows that you are an admirer of Fannie Lou Hamer, the civil rights activist and a singer, one we know who had a vocational call on their life to social justice, to equity, especially where it regards women, children, people from the South. Um, and thinking on one of her most famous lines, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Everybody knows that. People have put it in rap
Yes,
songs. We have quoted it over and over again. What were the
yes.
things that Fannie Lou Hamer was sick and tired of? And what motivated or energized her to continue the fight?
Well, yes, I would have to say, because of her dogged determination, her um, being energized by her faith, without many of the advantages and privileges that some of us in the academic community and in the middle class enjoy. Uh, she had and this came from her own mother, who had 22 children, taught them uh, how to treat people, what was right and what was wrong, drawing from their experience in the Black Baptist Church. And so Fannie Lou imbibed that sense of how to treat other people and to love. I mean, that love was essential in terms of relating to other people, even if you didn't care for how they acted. But she saw her role as living out the kind of love that we certainly find in 1 Corinthians 13. It's not romantic. It's not based on feeling. It's based on a conviction that this is what I must do. And so her life was particularly hard in rural Mississippi, born in 1917. That life was a hard life as a sharecropper. Her parents were sharecroppers under a system that was 2 seconds from enslavement. And yet they had to, it was a system where they could never advance, a system that kept them in economic bondage, despite working as hard as they could and as tenant farmers having to reckon with all the precariousness of farming is, and being very poor. That was a hard life, a hard struggle, and never quite feeling that you would be able to catch up, treated as though you were less than human. She recalls being treated, she had a job as an adult at one point, cleaning the houses of white people, and where there were 2 bathrooms, one for the dog, and she, as a sharecropper, having to use an outhouse, and the ridiculousness and the dehumanization of that. She was, by middle age, she was sick and tired of that kind of living because she knew it was counter to God's will and to human decency. And having been involuntarily sterilized, the indignity and theft of that violation of her body, she was sick and tired, and she had a conversion experience as young college people and members of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, coming to Mississippi to help people register to vote. She went to a meeting after a long day of working in the field, didn't feel like going, but was encouraged to go. And she heard a word by James Bevel and also James Foreman. And after that, she knew this was what her calling was. Really was a conversion experience to wedding her faith with politics. And she became a tireless figure in terms of the fight, but she was tired of injustice, tired of the ways in which the entire system of segregation functioned in the way to keep people from inadequate housing, the possibility of an education, the empowerment to vote, all these things. And at the age of 42, she decides, it's my time. I have to get out there. And it was costly. It was costly. They lost, or she and her husband, Perry, they lost their home. One of her daughters that she had raised lost her job, being identified with her, particularly on the voter registration thing. And she continued to suffer, but she knew this was what she needed to do and did it at great risk.
Yes, ma'am. Talking about spiritual grit, that is indeed an example of someone who has dug their heels deep in the ground to keep moving despite it all. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Sure.
My next question for you is, after reflecting on your ability to weave stories, skits, and other creative teaching tools in your lectures, I mean, if you've taken a class with Dr. Mitchell, you know what I'm talking about. I realize why many of us see you as griot. And for those of us who don't know what a griot is, it is one who is well-versed in African-rooted storytelling that preserves history, as well as helps us to get to moral truths. That's a griot. And we see you as a griot in the Wesley community and the broader church community. I just wanted to ask, could you share the story of a historical figure that we all should be modeling in the midst of all of the riots, protests, and unrest today?
Well, I thought about that, and there are a number of women and men whom I could lift up from certainly from the 19th century, with which I'm pretty familiar. But I have to say that I'm particularly thinking of the witness of John Lewis, another figure born in poverty from Georgia, which is the home state of my late father and his family. I have to list up John Lewis in particular because not having all the advantages, the privilege that quite a few of us have been able to experience, he too was one who learned from his family and his experience of the church, of the power of what it meant to follow the gospel message, which was they perceived as a message of liberation. And despite his beginnings, which would not necessarily suggest that he was going to attain the stature that he eventually did, he pressed on as a young preacher, preaching 15 years old when he preached his first sermon. But as one who did manage to attend a seminary and go on to college, doing so by the basis of working through his tuition, he became so committed to the early struggle in which Martin Luther King, under 30 years old, had started becoming engaged in. And so John Lewis, younger, somewhat younger than Dr. King, as a student, one of the first who participated in the freedom rides. And this was when standing up against white supremacy was dangerous. It could cost you your life. And yet he went forward with all he had, and retained his humility. He was not, this was not about John Lewis profiling, getting accolades, getting his picture in the paper, in the news. This was about a steadfast, hard-working, committed man who would give everything he had for the cause of his people, but people in general who lived, as Albert Thurman would say, with their backs against the wall. Mm-hmm. And I was particularly thinking of him. The nation will in some way honor him this week. And I particularly thought of his decision to go against SNCC. He was president of SNCC at the time, to march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, because of the senseless killing of Jimmy Lee Jackson. I mean, this just brings it all back, what we've had to live through. And his experiencing a concussion, his decision walking to try to walk and across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with Hosea Williams, when SNCC wasn't sure that was a good idea, but he had been with the people. John Lewis had been with the people, knew that they were ready to struggle, and whatever the cost. And he said, I have to be with them. So he's bucking his organization and going not as president of SNCC, but as John Lewis. And I had the privilege, 2011, of walking across that bridge. And I mean, it was what it meant, what it signified. I was choked up inside. This was long after all the events are gone. And I had the privilege of meeting John Lewis in Capitol Hill that same year. And the man was as ordinary, unpretentious, and open and friendly as you want to see. Yeah. And I am grieving his witness of what you know. Everybody can't stand on the protest line. Whatever we are called to do with the gifts that we are given, that's what we do with what we are given. We don't have to be like this person or that person. We are only asked to do what we've been gifted to do. And I think he is a modern day model of what that looks like. And I just felt the need to lift up Congressman Lewis.
That's a perfect example. And I mean, if we really want to take an example of someone who truly knows how to safeguard human dignity and has dedicated an entire lifetime to that, God bless John Lewis. God bless him. May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace, indeed. Indeed.
Yes. And speaking of safeguarding human dignity, You've researched, lectured, and written extensively on human dignity. In the midst of so many political divides, polarized groups, and divisive ideologies, what would it look like for America to have genuine regard for human dignity? And what are steps we should be taking to truly safeguard one another's human dignity?
You know, I thought when I wrote that a number of years ago that I knew what that would look like. And in the midst of this moment in which there is a lot of turmoil, things that have been hidden are coming to light, and it's crystal clear that although there are ways in which overt white supremacy has been underground, it is out of the shadows now. But there is hope that there are people from all walks of life who are waking up, who are coming to recognize. I am prayerful that this moment can be a moment in which people really get it. We'll have to wait and see on that. But the challenge, and I'm thoroughly convinced of this, the challenge of white supremacy in any kind of oppressive system is so deeply ingrained that we need more than protests. We need more than writing books. We need, it really involves a change of heart. It involves, sure enough, metanoia, where you are turning aside and walking in a new way. And so I am working to help other groups who want to address their issues of white supremacy, who are now waking up. I'll do that because that's part of my call to work with people to fight this. But it is not a superficial thing. And I really do think we need that which transcends our weaknesses, our frailties, our flaws to help us in this struggle. It's really a spiritual struggle at its core. And so, yeah, we can get new legislation. We can change the name of this statue, this building, this bridge, but that does not get at what ails us. And the same with recognizing human dignity. To me, it is just obvious that a fellow human being carries the image of God in him or her. It's just obvious, but it is not obvious to other folks. And so they need, it really needs a bone deep correction to their way of living, thinking, believing that is beyond some of the fixes that we've had over the years. And for me, if people could recognize that their value and worth is not tied to what they look like, what they have, who they know, then that it rests in the one who is responsible for giving them life. That changes the whole equation. Yes. From my perspective. And I am not sure how to help people see that. You know, it is more than just saying that. I wish I could and I've said this in class, if I could just have that tattooed on people's forehead, the transformation, when you see another person as the embodiment of God's image, that transforms the way you relate to it. Just things you could not do if you understood what that meant.
Yes.
That in some way they image God. And so right about now, I'm kind of struggling with how to convey that message, but it is essential. If we don't have that, we will be unable to reach the kind of justice that makes for peace.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to stay prayed up, as the old saints say. This work is profoundly spiritual work. It involves the whole of the person, and you've got to you have got to get the nourishment you need. Whether it doesn't have to be within Christianity, but some mechanism, some practice that enables you to deal with that which isn't constructive in you, so that it doesn't spill out on other people, and to be steadfast, as Fannie Lou Hamer and John Lewis were, when it was rough, and there were a lot of rough days. But you have to have the inner resources, the inner strength to press on.
The spiritual grit.
Yeah, spiritual. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Dr. Beverly Mitchell, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell. Just a few plugs. If you haven't done so already, I know some of you seminarians already have done so. Please go on Amazon and pick up Black Abolitionism. It is a phenomenal read by Dr. Beverly Mitchell. And also, Dr. Mitchell, do you have any other causes or charities you would like us to uplift and to contribute to?
As you mentioned earlier, I have recently become a board member of Bread for the World, and their work of addressing the issue of hunger here and elsewhere is phenomenal work, and any contribution to them would be helpful for the cause of ensuring that people are not hungry.
Absolutely. There are enough resources in this world for everyone to have a roof over their head and food in their belly. Yes. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell, for joining us here today. And
it's been a privilege. Thank you.
Yes. Folks, join us next week for Pastor Janice Harmon. She's a co-pastor at Emory Fellowship, and she's also bivocational. She is a leader at NASA, talking about the real Katherine Johnson stuff going on here. She's a counselor of young adults, and she is a true community faith leader. So, but until then, keep pressing, keep pushing.
We all must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. We all live in the same house. And it doesn't matter whether we are black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. It doesn't matter whether you're straight or gay. We are one people, we are one family. We all live in the same house. Be bold. Be courageous. Stand up, speak out, and find a way to create the beloved community, the beloved world, a world of peace, a world that recognizes the dignity of all humankind. Never become bitter, never become hostile, never hate. Live in peace. We are one. one people, and one love. Thank you very much.